Hello, everyone. Welcome to the InstructLab CLI meeting for November 14th. And before we get started on the main agenda items, let me go through just a few housekeeping items. So all our meetings are governed by the InstructLab Community Code of Conduct, and the meetings are recorded and will be posted to the InstructLab YouTube channel. If you prefer not to be on camera, you're free to join with your cameras off or dial in via telephone. And if you're calling on the phone, you can jump in at some point if you need to ask questions or raise a comment. But if you're on Google Meet, please raise your hand to ask the question so we can have some, order and organization with the meeting. You can also use the chat function in Google Meet for that, if that's preferred, and we will share the chat transcript with the meeting recordings after the meeting. Cool. Let's get started with the incoming 0.21 release. Is this Nathan or?
It was me, actually.
All right.
So we are going to be cutting the 0.21 release tomorrow at some point, probably closer to the end of the day. There's been a lot of changes in this release, a lot of fit and finish stuff, but a lot of good features as well. So just to call out some of the big ones, there was a model default change. So the default model for a lot of operations used to be Merlinite. We're changing that to Granite because, as everyone knows, Granite is the model architecture that both IBM and Red Hat are maintaining rather than the old Merlinite architecture. So that shouldn't be too big of a change for most people. We're still going to be downloading Merlinite because it's the model that has to be used with the simple SDG pipeline. So you're still going to have Merlinite. We'll just also download a Granite GGUF for you when you run iLab model download. And yeah, that's kind of the summary of those changes. Nathan, I don't know if you wanted to add anything or if you just wanted me to keep chugging along here.
I can talk a bit about the model default change. Since that was something I wanted. So basically, so originally this project was very focused on sort of the Merlinite model, which, if you don't know Merlinite, it is lab-aligned llama. But we have been increasingly focused on IBM's Granite architecture with the Granite family of models. So as we've been introducing more and more support for this, we've had some questions, rightfully so, about sort of, well, why am I seeing Merlinite GGUFs everywhere, which is a fair point. And we're still using the Merlinite GGUF for the SDG simple pipeline, but by and large, we are sort of have shifted our focus to Granite. So starting in 0.21, the Granite GGUF will be the default model for chatting and to train, et cetera, et cetera. So there are now going to be 3 default models that are downloaded. That is Granite, Merlinite, and Mistral. We are hoping to cut that down to 2 in the future, based on some of the pipeline work that we're doing with SDG. But yeah, if you're upgrading from 0.20 to 0.21, it may behoove you to run an iLab model download again to make sure you have all those default models, depending on what pipeline you're running. Yeah, that's basically it on that. Carol.
Yes. So when it's hopefully narrowed down to 2, which 2 would it be? Granite and
Mistral.
Mistral. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thanks, Nathan.
You're welcome.
Some of the other stuff is a new flag for SDG called maximum tokens. So what that does is it basically caps for knowledge generation, it caps the amount of generated tokens for the gen knowledge phase, which speeds up SDG significantly. You'll see some significant speed ups if you're doing a larger generation. So if you have like a larger markdown, probably like 20-ish pages, you'll see that part of SDG runs quicker. For smaller documents, those are already pretty quick, so you might not see as much of a speed up, but it's worth sort of using the flag if you're looking for speed. So the default is 4096, but we've tested as far down as 512, and we've seen some significant speed increases. So you can give that a try. Because I know that a lot of people were using the full pipeline, which is what we now default to in the laptops, and they were saying it takes forever or or like it's inconsistent. So that will at least give the process a better chance of being quicker, so you can see results faster. Besides that, I know that we've already talked about system profiles a lot. I just kind of wanted to remind everyone again that those have merged for 0.21. So you will be getting an auto-detected system profile for your system. We have Mac system profiles, NVIDIA, Intel and AMD CPU profiles. So basically, if you have any system that we support, you should get a auto-detected system profile. If you're not, you can feel free to open a PR with your system profile to the profiles directory of the InstructLab repository. Cool. So one other kind of important thing that we got into this release is training optimizations. Similar to SDG taking a long time and requiring a lot of RAM, we got the full training pipeline to fit on 16 gigabytes of RAM. So feel free to give that a shot in the next release. You might still get an error that says like you have to set this environment variable from PyTorch if you're on 16 gigabytes of RAM specifically. So if you get that error, you can set that environment variable. That's something that's managed by PyTorch, not by us. So I didn't want to put that in the code and set it for the user because that kind of seemed out of scope. If you're on 32 gigs of RAM, this will definitely work. You should be able to actually use your computer a little bit while training is running, which is kind of nice. But I've been running it on 16 since those changes merged, and I've seen good results. So I would advise everyone to use the full pipelines, not the simple pipelines, as we are not maintaining the simple pipelines anymore, generally speaking. So if you're using those and you hit some errors, we have overall less knowledge about how to fix those things versus if you use the full pipelines. Those are things that we're actively maintaining in each release. Cool. I threw this in here as a targeted use cases of InstructLab. Just generally, as we add a lot of these things that make the full pipelines more viable on consumer hardware, what we're really aiming for is the minimum footprint is a 32 gigabyte Mac or a 64 gigabyte Linux machine. 32 also works on Linux, but if you're on a laptop on Linux and you don't have a GPU integrated into the laptop, you're going to see slower runtimes just by the nature of CPUs. So Macs have the PyTorch NPS device, which kind of like blows CPUs out of the water when you actually run them side by side. So if you have a Mac, you'll see really quick runtimes. If you're on Linux on a CPU, you won't see as fast runtimes just by the nature of how this hardware works. So if you're on a 16 gig machine, seeing great results on minimal hardware is kind of an unrealistic expectation of InstructLab. I know that with QLoRa, we used to support the 16 gigabyte footprint more, but we are seeing degraded results with QLoRa over time. And we would rather provide a workflow that yields a good model than one that yields a quick model, right? So that we're kind of aiming for high fidelity or at least medium fidelity models rather than models that are produced within an hour. But if you are on a Mac, you should see relatively quick results, like an epoch of a relative size data set on a Mac should run within an hour or two. So if you run 2 epochs, you should have a model that kind of at least is starting to pick up on the knowledge you're introducing. So I just wanted to put that in here. If you're on a Linux laptop, the training optimizations that we did are primarily for Mac, and Linux is hit or miss because some CPUs are not optimized to take advantage of the things that we added to get it working on a smaller footprint. So by default, those things are not enabled on Linux. So you'll have to use a new flag called optimized memory on Linux if you're looking to fit it on a smaller piece of hardware. On CPUs specifically, because Intel and AMD CPUs they just don't always have these optimizations, and actually using them can sometimes make the processes slower. So buyer beware with that, but on a Mac, this is always enabled. So if you use optimized memory with training or maximum tokens with SDG, you should see quicker results that are more optimized for smaller hardware. So cool. Does anyone have any questions about anything that I just kind of said? Because I know I just threw a lot of information there.
Yeah. So just to clarify, you said these flags are by default on for Macs, but you have to set them for Linux. Is that correct?
So the optimized memory flag. So one of them is for training and one of them is for SDG. Maximum tokens is is not like a toggle. It's more of like a number that you pass.
Right.
So that will default to the default value of 4096. If you want to turn it down, you can, both on Mac and on Linux. So that is kind of ubiquitous between whatever hardware you're running on. It just equates to less tokens generated. So it's quicker. Optimized memory is the flag that allows you to turn on the same things that we enabled on Mac, but on Linux, if you really think your machine can handle it, and it allows it to run on less RAM. But depending on what CPU you have on Linux, you might not improve the results, but it also can. So like on my laptop, for example, my Linux laptop using optimized memory fits in 16 gigs of RAM and runs quicker. But on an Intel machine that I tested on AWS, it actually decreased, or I guess it increased the runtime. So it didn't really, it's kind of hit or miss on CPUs. So that's why I made it an optional flag for Linux, but it's always on for Mac. It's confusing. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that.
That's why it's thanks for the clarification, because I wasn't sure, but yeah, that's more clear now. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions about anything before we move on to the next bullet point here? Cool. Don't know who put this one on, STG CLI refactor re-architecture, but
Maybe that's Anastas.
Yes, that's me. This is maybe a bit of a heads up. Right now, one thing that we're looking at is bringing in some new functionality into STG, and in order to do that, we have to do a bit of a refactor and re-architecture, which involves also pulling the ingestion or document conversion pieces into their own, at least submodule for now, modularizing it somehow. So there is some re-architecture work coming up. Mostly just a heads up. I don't anticipate there being any interface or CLI changes at this time, but there might be in the future. Nathan, Charlie, if you want to add anything, I think that was about it, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I guess like some more context around that is basically that STG right now sort of is handling a lot of things that are not purely synthetic data generation, right? It's also handling things like taking taxonomy, making some sort of pre-processing of the data before, creating the data sets that we're actually doing STG on. So, and do correct me if I'm wrong here, Anastas, but from what I've understood about the conversations that I've had is basically the idea is, all right, we want STG to purely be STG. That's data sets in and synthetically generated data out. And we want to start moving some of these components, especially as we start to incorporate, other libraries like Dockling into the mix. Like we want to maybe have that data ingestion piece either be a separate library or part of the CLI or a submodule somewhere. But basically the idea is that we want to decouple it from STG. And that may...
Yes, that's right. Thank you for pushing it. Sorry, I thought you would finish your sentence. That may...
Oh, no, that was it. But basically, yeah, it's like that. I believe that's still sort of, that design is still being underdone, if that's correct.
Yes, Charlie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to call out that I'm pretty sure there's going to be a dev doc opened about all of this in the dev doc repo. So I think that's going to be open pretty much any day now. So if you have any opinions about where this ingestion code should live, or the re-architecture in general. So basically, as Nathan said, it's STG does a pre-processing step of turning the leaf nodes into samples in a data set that goes into STG. And as STG kind of evolves, modularizing it, so it's really just the synthetic data generation process as a core, like when you call like generate data, for example, it should just be doing that. Should it be doing taxonomy management? The question is, what do we do with the rest of the functionality? And how is it going to impact, day-to-day operations of running the commands, and how is it going to impact the architecture of the existing libraries? So it is a really important conversation for folks to be a part of. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, keep your eye on the DevDocs repo. And when that gets opened, I might actually send a message in the Upstream Slack for people to participate in that conversation, just because I think it's a really important one that shouldn't be made in a vacuum. Yeah, so that's kind of it from my side of things. Something that might come out of it is some new commands to do these sort of like pieces that are being pulled into different places, right? So like if we're conceptually separating doc ingestion out from data generation, then having doc ingestion as its own thing as part of the InstructLab workflow would probably make sense. So a lot of that is being hashed out in the dev doc as well. So keep your eyes on that repo.
Yes, thank you. And I'll just make one last comment that hopefully this is the first of an increasing amount of modularization that will allow us to bring in new things faster in the future. But I won't go further into that at this time.
Sounds great. Thank you. Cool. I think we've covered the main agenda items. Is there any additional items from anyone in the meeting?
I'll throw in one thing briefly, which is that if folks are interested, like I said, 21 should be being released tomorrow. We're going to be moving some stuff from the 21 milestone to the 22 milestone, in addition to some other stuff that is present there. So I'll say if you're involved, or if you're not involved and you're curious about the content for 22, you can check that milestone there. If there's anything in the milestone that's unassigned that you're interested in, please feel free to let the maintainer team know. If you are working on something that's already being targeted for 22, I would ask you to go through your tickets and just make sure that they are set to that milestone, so we have a good good idea of what content will be going into that release. Mr. Rao has his hand raised. Good morning, sir.
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, no, just to add on, I don't know if this was discussed, but the other thing that users can expect with 21 is also support for the new Granite architecture models. That's something that I'm working on. It hasn't merged yet, but we're expecting that it will be merged today. It should be included in the release for 21. That'll bring support for things like, bring your own chat templates, and also like using the right system, like adding support for multiple chat templates and system prompts based on the architecture of the model that you use. And going forwards, we have also some work to support properly extracting architecture information from GGF models and stuff like that. And like moving forward, the idea is to try and bring your own system prompt use cases. That's a little bit more in the future. It's not for 21, but this is sort of setting the groundwork for allowing you to bring your own system prompt eventually, which would be, I think, pretty useful, because a lot of, I think, folks have use cases where they need to bake in their own system prompts to give their own models identities and such, which is not possible today, but we're sort of moving in that direction. So just putting that out there for folks.
Cool, thank you. Any additional comments? And any additional topics for open discussion, open floor? Did y'all see the person dressed up as InstructLab for Halloween on LinkedIn? If you haven't, go under LinkedIn, the InstructLab LinkedIn page. There's a only dressed up as InstructLab. It's just.
I know, I saw that, Carol. I should have been the taxonomy for Halloween.
Next time we should have like a whole series, right? Yeah.
Yeah, all the components. Charlie will be the CLI.
Exactly.
Be the taxonomy.
Yep.
You think you'd be CI.
You know me so well, Julia.
And of course, Carol, community.
Yes. I think that would be wonderful if we can get together for something like that. But
I'm sure Brent and Neil would do something cool for the UI as well.
Ah, there we go. All right. If not, nothing else, we'll adjourn for today and see you in a week for the regular CLI meeting. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Valsio.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.